Oh my gosh, there's so much going on. Welcome back to my channel, and I guess my weeks 1 and 2 combined post-op update. I was fully intending to do weekly updates as soon as I got back from surgery and just keeping you guys up to date with what's going on.
Do I have something in my teeth?
I have found that as soon as I got back, it's just been go, 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 go. If you've watched any of my previous videos, I kind of talked about this during the pre-op stage, and I had a couple of times where I felt really overwhelmed by the thoughts of the future, including my upcoming surgery and possible impending doom. And I just felt like really crippled by the things that had to be done by the end of the year. That didn't go away. My surgery was completed. Everything's gone really well, but I still have a lot to do by the end of the year. And so I was realizing that I just didn't have the kind of time and ability to do the weekly updates right now that I thought I did. In a lot of ways, that's really unfortunate because I think the first month after surgery is probably important. And if you're following along and you want updates, or you're trying to figure out what to anticipate in the first month, I haven't been able to provide that. I think I've got a grip on the next several weeks. So today's going to be a combination of weeks 1 and 2. And then in a couple of days, I'll do a week 3 update for you guys. And then you'll be all caught up and we'll just go from there. One of the reasons that week 1 was so busy was because my mom was actually continuing to stay with me that week just to help out and make sure everything went fine after surgery. With 2020, the way that it's been, and COVID, I found it way more enjoyable to spend time visiting with my mom than it was to worry about getting any videos out. So that whole first week, I was experiencing new things, but I was just really enjoying the company of my mom, and she was helping me out and making sure that everything went well. So I will link my 4-day post-op update. It's a really short one, but it kind of talks a little bit about those first few days after surgery. The biggest thing that I noticed right after surgery is I had this sudden food aversion, and it was mostly to broth. I don't really have any reason why. I didn't drink so much broth that I would be tired of it. It's not like it didn't taste good to me or didn't sit well with me. I just reached this point a few days after surgery where I absolutely wanted nothing to do with broth. The idea of broth was literally like churning my stomach, and I would get almost nauseous just thinking about broth, and it was very bizarre. I'm not entirely sure where that came from or what was going on, but by day 3 and 4, I was just drinking water and Gatorade and apple juice, and I just wasn't even doing anything remotely around broth or protein because I just couldn't stomach the idea of drinking it, and I don't know why. One of the other things I noticed shortly after surgery was a change in my taste buds. I had heard that this was entirely possible and that a lot of people experience liking and disliking different foods entirely from what they were pre-op. And so I was paying attention and trying to figure out if any of that was happening to me. And I finally realized it several days after surgery when I decided I was going to try to make a Crystal Light to drink. When I took a drink of the Crystal Light, it was bizarrely salty. I feel like I could taste all of the salt in the Crystal Light, to the extent that when I was done actively drinking it and I was just sitting there, my tongue felt like I just licked a salt lick. It was very strange, and I've noticed that in a couple of other things that I've had where the salt seems really prevalent. I guess I'm really sensitive to some sodium at this point. I'm not sure if that's going to be permanent. I don't know what to expect with that, but I have pretty much just been able to drink water entirely. I think that's the reason why I really wasn't liking Gatorade. I couldn't figure out what about the Gatorade I wasn't enjoying, but I would imagine it's probably the salt. And it's actually the opposite problem than what I was reading about online. There's a lot of people who seem to have an inability to drink just regular water after their surgery, and it just doesn't sit well in their stomach for some reason. I would like to know what the science is behind that or why that would be the case. Sometimes they can manage it based on either really cold water or maybe it has to be room temperature, but there are quite a few people who really don't handle plain water after surgery very well. And I was really scared that I was going to be in this situation where I was going to have to flavor my waters for the rest of forever. I just don't want to have to rely on flavored waters if I didn't have to. I really enjoy drinking just plain water, and so I was so scared that after surgery I was going to run into that same problem. But I'm having the opposite happen. I haven't really wanted to drink anything other than plain water. I've had a couple of things here and there, and some taste better than others, but for the most part, all I drink is plain water during the day. And that's probably the best situation I can be in, so there's no complaints on my end. So about 5 days after I got home from the hospital, which would have been about Wednesday the 9th, I actually stopped needing pain medication. The pain that I was experiencing was not what I would have expected and not what I would really like to label pain, but I'll get to this point where I would be very aware that I have insides. I don't know a better way to describe that. I would get very uncomfortable, and it was just like all of a sudden I could feel my organs, and I would know that it was time for a pain medication. So it was more uncomfortable than it was painful in any way. And the pain medication, I did not need every 8 hours like I could take it. So I was at the point where I was taking it pretty much right when I woke up in the morning because I would feel like I really needed to take the edge off. And then I would take a second one maybe in the late afternoon or early evening when I would feel that feeling again. In the last couple of days, I think I only took one a day when I first woke up. So the pain subsided really fast. The discomfort was getting better and better every day, and I was really feeling pretty good. So in terms of food, I was on clear liquids for 5 days. The post-op paperwork that I was given did say that between 5 and 7 days post-op, you could switch over from clear liquids if you felt ready and if you were staying hydrated enough. Because of my broth aversion, I absolutely felt 100% ready to move on to thick liquids. I was able to keep down 64 ounces of water easily every day, but I was ready for something with more substance and something that was other than clear liquid. So I started off with yogurt, and I actually added some almond milk to it and thinned it out a little bit just to make sure that it was a really liquidy, soft texture for me to start intaking. And then my first dinner was basically a can of bean with bacon soup that I thoroughly blended in my Ninja. I found that blended soups and yogurts were pretty much the only thing that I could do for the first few days. I would have a yogurt cup, which is just over 5 ounces, and I wouldn't want to have anything for lunch, and I would end up having a blended soup for dinner. I also noticed that I could only do about half a cup at a time, and even though it was liquid, I could definitely tell when I was full and done eating or drinking, I guess. The biggest thing I noted was that my fullness was a totally different experience. And when I was paying attention and eating very slow and very mindfully, I would hit this point where I just absolutely didn't want to eat anything anymore. And I didn't feel full, but I felt done. And I would stop at that point, and probably about 10 minutes later or so, I would start to feel like I was actually full. So listening to that signal in my mind is imperative. This is why people say that it's very easy to accidentally overeat, because you don't necessarily get that fullness sensation right away. And so I've just been listening to that little voice that says, hey, I think I'm done eating now. There have been several times when I wanted more, but I listened to that little voice and I said, I'm going to go ahead and stop now. And so far, I haven't had a very full, very uncomfortable feeling. So I'm going to throw my stats from week 1 up right here. I'm going to do a little bit of a different format so it's more consistent with some of the stuff that I see online with post-op patients. So I'm going to start with my highest weight ever recorded, then my surgery weight, and then I'll let you know what I weigh each week and of course what that weekly loss is. So again, my surgery weight was 344 pounds. And week 1, I weighed in at 340.4 pounds. So it was a 3.6 pound loss for that first week. Now, I personally was very ecstatic about this. I thought 3.6 pounds was great. But there's always that part of you that's like, well, I pretty much not even eaten anything, so why didn't I lose more weight than that? One thing to keep in mind is that a week post-op, you still have some of the gas from the surgery and you're still a little bit bloated from the IV. That first week after surgery, do not expect a big weight loss. The number one thing that I've read and that I can recommend is to not weigh yourself constantly. Now, I've heard a lot of people who recommend just not weighing yourself for the first month after surgery so that you're not fixated on it. And I think that's probably pretty solid advice if you can manage to stay away from it. Me personally, I'm in a really good headspace and I have no expectations for my weight loss at this point. I just want to see what the results are every week. Part of that is so that I can record it and let you guys know, but part of it's just because it feels like this really big experiment at this point, and I just want to know, what am I looking at here? I have absolutely no expectations every week for what I'm going to see, and I just want to record. My personal experience, I still felt pretty bloated after surgery. In my other videos, you can see how swollen my hand and my arms were. My ankles were awful. That IV did a number on me. I'm not really surprised, and I would not be shocked if that reflected in that number at all, because it is a lot for your body to go through and a lot for you to start adjusting to. So starting on week 2, I really noticed a desire to eat everything. I managed to go through most of my pre-op without very many cravings. I had a really easy time. I didn't really miss a lot of the food that I was eating before. And so I was a little bit surprised when suddenly on week 2, I wanted to eat anything and everything. I think it's really important to note that I did not have an appetite. I was not hungry. I just wanted to eat everything that I could think of, anything that I saw, anything that I smelled. And I think it's just because I had been on liquids for so long at that point. I didn't get an appetite and I didn't start feeling hungry until day 11. Because it was day 11 and I suddenly got very hungry for breakfast and then found myself getting hungry a few hours later for lunch, I realized that I was probably ready to move on to very soft foods at that point. I had done thick liquids for about 6 days. My goal was to do 7 full days in each stage, and obviously play it by ear depending on how my body was handling it and paying attention to everything that I was eating and everything that was new being introduced into my system, and just really being in tune with what was the appropriate thing to move on to. But after 6 days, I knew that I was ready to start eating different types of food. So at that point, I very slowly introduced things like cottage cheese and soft cheeses, a lot of cheese. Oh my gosh, have I just eaten a lot of cheese so far? And I focused on just eating very small amounts, chewing very well, and just seeing how it sat with me. I've been so fortunate and so grateful that nothing has really upset my stomach. Every new thing that I introduced not only sat well and made me feel really good, but it tasted amazing to be eating again. Once I started eating soft foods, my cravings went away again. It was really just this mental game of feeling like I needed to eat food. And because I couldn't eat food, I wanted to eat anything and everything. Once I started nourishing myself again with food that I could actually chew and food that I felt like I had a little bit more choice over, it made a huge difference. With the soft food, I noticed that I can eat between about 3 ounces and 6 ounces depending on what I'm eating. When I added oatmeal and things like that, I can really only eat about 3 or 4 ounces of that at a time, and it's very filling. But when I eat something like cottage cheese, I've noticed that it's really not difficult for me to eventually slowly get through the full 6 ounces. I am not eating anything more than 6 ounces at a time, so I'm weighing out all of my food. Whether or not I get through the whole 6 ounces, I just leave that up to what my body tells me, but I am weighing every meal and making sure that I don't have any opportunities to potentially eat more than 6 ounces at a time. One thing that I really noticed weeks 1 and 2 was the amount of burping that I did and still do. The problem that I had the day after surgery when they started me on liquids again never went away. any little tiny bit of liquid or food or anything that goes into my mouth comes out as a burp. I don't know what exactly the problem is, if I'm just swallowing a lot of air or if it literally just has to do with my new system, but I feel like I'm constantly burping just all the time. It has been getting better. At first, it was just burps all the time throughout the day. I think a lot of that had to do with being directly after surgery. So the longer it's been since surgery, the fewer the burps have been. And now they just really seem to occur around eating or drinking. But because I'm trying to drink steadily throughout the day to get my 65 ounces of water in, there's still a lot of burping. Week 2 also was the start of vitamins. So once you hit week 2, you need to start incorporating vitamins back into your routine. I was really gung-ho that morning and I just took all of them before breakfast. There's 2 things to keep in mind there. 1, you shouldn't take vitamins on an empty stomach. Because I took all of my vitamins before I had breakfast, I really felt it. The other half of that problem being that I took all of them at once. Now, I haven't had any problems with throwing up or any issues with things really not settling well, but that first day with vitamins really did make my stomach feel quite upset, and I had to take a breather and go sit down on the couch and just give it a few minutes before it subsided. So ever since then, I have been spreading my vitamins out throughout the day. It's better to do that anyway because it helps with absorption and you're not trying to absorb all of the vitamins all at once. But the very next day when I spread out those vitamins, I did not have the same kind of issue on my stomach as I did on day 1. One of the other things I really realized during week 2 was that once I started adding in some foods and I really started paying attention to making sure that I wasn't drinking 30 minutes before and after eating, I realized that I don't really have any time to snack in between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even if I was hungry, because getting in your water between those meals when you have to wait that time in between is a challenge. And what I notice is that if I get hungry, it's a little inconvenient and it kind of sucks because I have to wait 30 minutes before I can eat anything. Waiting 30 minutes before being able to eat doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but my hunger comes on really suddenly now. And all of the sudden, my tiny little pouch will be like, oh my God, we're empty. So far, it hasn't been the worst thing in the world, but it is something that I'm gonna have to get used to. And then finally, I think one of the biggest things that I really noticed and one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with since starting week 2 is the mental portion of it. I knew what to expect. I knew that this wasn't going to be an easy process and that the majority of this is really up in my head and it's not about physical issues. It was really interesting when I started eating foods again that, the very first time that I started dishing up cottage cheese, I started dishing a portion that old me would have eaten. I had to take a second and actually look at the scale and realize that suddenly I was, at 7 ounces of cottage cheese and I had just been plopping it into the bowl, not thinking about it. My mind wants to go to big portions so bad. Not only does it want to go to big portions, but I've noticed that I've been mourning my big portions. It's not every day, it's not every meal, and it's not overwhelming, but I definitely have had thoughts multiple times where I miss eating food. I don't think I'm gonna miss the binging. I don't think I'm gonna miss eating way more than I needed to, and I don't think I'm gonna miss the junk food. But a good example would be I miss eating a plate full of broccoli. It's a healthy choice. It's a perfectly fine choice. It's something that I've been doing for years, is just trying to bulk up on more vegetables. And it's something that I did a lot during pre-op because it was one of the things that I didn't have to measure and I was allowed to eat as much vegetables as I wanted. And now that I'm done with surgery, I'm finding that I'm only allowed to eat 1 or 2 ounces of vegetable because I need to prioritize my protein first. And that is just, it is hard for my brain to comprehend and to understand that we can't eat the same way anymore. Like I said, it is not overwhelming. It's not the worst thing in the world. And it's definitely not something I think about every single meal. But it has been a very prevalent thought that I can't believe I can't even remotely eat what I used to. That being said, when I do weigh out and I eat my food, I sometimes struggle to eat that tiny amount, and I find myself very satisfied and pleasantly full, and I'm not upset that I can't eat more. It's just mentally so different to dish up such a small amount of food and then not be able to eat all of it. My stats for week 2 are going to go right here. Again, my surgery weight was 344 and I weighed in at 330.2 pounds, which was a 10.2 pound loss for week 2. So there is where all the water weight went. So that brings me to a 13.8 total loss so far since surgery, which is insane. Almost 14 pounds in 2 weeks is just insane to me. I can't believe how much I've lost already. That being said, it wasn't easy. Rewiring your brain and relearning how to eat and going from liquids to not even solid foods, just soft solid foods, is not an easy process, and it can feel really overwhelming and really restrictive. But in terms of how things have gone, I haven't had any problems. I haven't had anything that I'm worried about. I've lost enough weight now that I can wear my pants again that weren't fitting for months. And overall, I'm just feeling really good and really solid in my decision to go forward with this. So that's my update for weeks 1 and 2 combined. This week is the week of Christmas, but I'm still going to try to get out a week 3 update for you guys right before Christmas so that we can be all caught up and ready to jump forward after the holidays. So stay tuned for the next video. Let me know if there's anything in particular that you would like a video about or you would like more information about in terms of my experience so far. I've gotten so many comments from people who are either about to go through surgery or have already gone through surgery, and it really makes me feel like there's a supportive community of people out here ready and willing to give as much information as possible so that everybody is as informed as possible before surgery. So if there's anything in particular that I can be helpful with, feel free to let me know, and I'd love to do a video on it. Stay tuned for my next video in a couple of days, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Well, my pants fell down as I was walking into the house today, so yeah, I think things are going pretty well.